I'm going to take a few minutes to walk through the Nord Stage for 88 key bundle and explain why it feels like a serious commitment rather than a flashy gadget you just add to a shelf. If you're on the fence about spending a premium on a stage-ready piano, the real question is whether the instrument actually solves the day-to-day problems you face, not whether it looks cool under a spotlight. Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. Let's dig into the kind of situations that make the Nord Stage for worth the price tag, and where it might end up gathering dust. First off, the Nord Stage 4 sits in a niche that blends two worlds: the piano player who needs a reliable, fully weighted action for gigging, and the synth enthusiast who wants deep layering without lugging around a rack of modules. That combination already filters out a lot of potential buyers. If you're a bedroom hobbyist who only practices a few hours a week and already has a cheap digital piano, you'll probably feel the $5 $6K price is a stretch. On the other hand, if you're a touring keyboardist who swaps between piano, organ, and synth patches multiple times per set, the convenience of having all those sounds under one roof can save you both time and gear. One of the first things I looked at was the key feel, because that's the part you notice the instant you sit down. The 88 fully weighted keys are built to mimic an acoustic piano's hammer action, and they actually respond that way when you play a fast run or a delicate Chopin phrase. In my tests, the keys didn't feel stiff or overly heavy. They gave a satisfying resistance that translated into a natural dynamic range. For players who rely on touch sensitivity for expression, that weighted feel removes the habit of constantly adjusting finger pressure when you move from a cheap synth to a real piano. It also means you can practice technique on the Stage 4 and carry that muscle memory straight to a concert grand without relearning anything. Now, the bundle includes the Nord GB88 soft case, which is more than a simple gig bag. The case folds around the instrument, protecting the polished finish while still allowing quick access to the front panel controls. For road warriors, the ability to slide the keyboard into a case that fits in a standard airline size carry-on is a genuine time saver. I've seen musicians struggle with hard shells that add a few extra inches to a flight's luggage allowance. The GB88 avoids that hassle while still offering a decent cushion against bumps. When it comes to sound, the Stage 4 carries Nord's classic split-and-layer workflow, but the real-world value shows up in how quickly you can swap patches mid-set. I built a test set where I needed a bright piano for the opening ballad, a mellow organ for the bridge, and a gritty synth lead for the final chorus. With the Stage 4, I could assign each to separate layers and trigger them with a single button press, keeping my hands free for performance. In a live setting that translates to fewer mistakes and smoother transitions, something that many reviewers overlook in favor of raw tone specs. However, the instrument isn't without practical trade-offs. The onboard display, while clear, is relatively small compared to some newer workstations that favor touchscreen navigation. When you're digging through deep patch banks in a dimly lit venue, you might find yourself scrolling a bit more than you'd like. It's not a deal breaker, but it's a small friction point that can add up during a long set. Another nuance is the reliance on Nord's own software for deep editing. If you're used to third-party DAWs that automap controls, you'll need to spend some rehearsal time learning Nord's editor layout. That learning curve is worth it for the depth of sound you get, but it does mean the instrument isn't plug-and-play for a musician who expects instant presets. Battery life is another realistic concern. The Stage 4 runs on an internal power supply, and while you can power it from a wall outlet on stage, you're also able to run it off a standard 12V power brick if you're gigging in a smaller venue. In my real-world test, a full set of 90 minutes of heavy playing drained the internal battery just enough to notice a slight dimming of the display, though the sound engine stayed fully operational. For most gigging scenarios, you'll have a power source nearby, but if you plan on outdoor busking or acoustic-only gigs without electricity, you'll need a backup solution. So, who should actually buy the Nord Stage for 88 key bundle? If you're a professional keyboardist who needs a single instrument that can convincingly cover piano, organ, and synth sounds in a live context, the Stage 4 delivers a level of flexibility that can replace several separate keyboards on stage. It also makes sense for studio musicians who want a high-quality piano action and a broad palette of sounds without juggling multiple units. The inclusion of the GB88 case adds value for anyone who travels regularly, as it reduces the need for a bulky hard